All right, let's just jump right in. We are absolutely surrounded by AI, but here's the thing. What we think we know about it, it's often miles away from the truth. So today, we're going to cut through all that hype and break down the 6 biggest topics that almost everyone gets wrong about AI. AI has its hands in everything. It influences the loan you might get for a house, your job prospects, even the news that pops up in your feed. It's everywhere. But let me ask you this. Do you really know how it all works? Or are we all just kind of running on assumptions? So let's start with the biggest one, the most fundamental misunderstanding of them all. Topic number 1, pattern, not person. This is all about the myth of the thinking machine. We love to imagine that when we ask an AI a question, it's really understanding us. That it's thinking, reflecting, and reasoning its way to an answer. But the reality? It's something else entirely. AI isn't thinking. It's playing a high-stakes game of probability, statistically predicting the single most likely word to come next in a sentence. The engine behind this whole thing is called autoregressive prediction. That's the heart of a large language model. And let's be super clear, it has nothing to do with comprehension or understanding. It's just incredibly sophisticated pattern matching, trained on basically the entire internet to figure out which words tend to follow other words. And look, you don't just have to take my word for it. A landmark paper on this called it perfectly. These models are, and I quote, stitching together sequences of linguistic forms observed in its vast training data without any reference to meaning. They're basically just very, very advanced parrots. Okay, so that leads us directly into our second big myth. This one's all about confusing code with actual cognition, and that very tempting idea that artificial neural networks are basically just digital brains. The myth is just so seductive, isn't it? That these artificial neural networks, or ANNs, are digital copies of our own brains. But the reality is a lot less sci-fi and a lot more math. They're mathematical models that were inspired by the brain, sure, but that's really where the comparison ends. How they actually work is fundamentally different. So how different are we talking? Well, it's like night and day. Our brains, they're living, breathing biological systems. We're learning constantly, creating new connections our whole lives. ANs, on the other hand, are just code. And for the most part, once they're trained, they're static, they're frozen. They can't learn anything new without being completely retrained from scratch. This brings us to misconception number 3, and I think we're all a little guilty of this one. It's the generator, not database fallacy. This is that classic mix-up where we treat things like ChatGPT as if they're just a new version of Google. Let's do a quick refresher on how a search engine actually works. It's a pretty straightforward process. First, bots crawl the web, reading pages that already exist. Second, all that content gets organized into a gigantic library, or index. And third, when you type in a search, the engine just goes into that library, finds the most relevant stuff, and gives you a ranked list of links. It finds things that are already there. Now, compare that to generative AI. It's a completely different animal. You give it a prompt, but instead of searching a library, it fires up its statistical model to predict a likely sequence of words. And then it generates something brand new. It's synthesizing, it's creating. It's not just fetching. I think deep learning pioneer Jan LeCun put it best. He said, the difference is generation of new content based on a language model versus the retrieval of existing content from an index of web pages. They're playing 2 totally different sports. Okay, number 4 is a huge one, and it has some really serious real-world consequences. It's reflection, not objectivity, or what I call the dangerous myth of the unbiased machine. It is so easy to fall into the trap of thinking, hey, it's math, it's code, it has to be objective. Right? Wrong. So wrong. The truth is, AI systems are mirrors, and they are perfect, unflinching mirrors that reflect all of the human biases, conscious or not, that are baked into the data we train them on. And this bias creeps in everywhere. You've got historical bias, which just automates our past prejudices, like a hiring tool learning that resumes with the word women's on them are bad. Then there's selection bias, where the training data isn't diverse, leading to things like facial recognition that just doesn't work well for people with darker skin. And there's even proxy bias, where something that seems neutral, like a zip code, ends up being a stand-in for race, leading to discriminatory loan denials. And if you think this is just some academic theory, think again. This really happened. A major company built an AI hiring tool that had a decade of its own hiring data from a male-dominated field, and it literally taught itself to be sexist. It learned our worst habits and put them on autopilot. All right, let's move on to myth number 5. Tool, not actor. This is where we need to pump the brakes on the whole science fiction idea that AI has a mind of its own. Here's the bottom line. AI systems don't decide to do anything. They don't have intentions. They are tools, period. They execute instructions that were designed by humans using data that was collected and curated by humans. Every single thing an AI does traces right back to a human choice. And this is why getting this right matters so much. As this quote says, recognizing this fact is essential for attributing responsibility when things go wrong. We can't just throw up our hands and blame the algorithm. The buck stops with the people who built it and deployed it. And that brings us to our 6th and final point. AI is math, not magic. And this is all about understanding that these systems have real, hard-coded architectural limits. You've probably heard people talk about the black box of AI, right? It makes it sound so mysterious, like it's some unknowable magical thing. But it's not magic, it's just an incredibly complex system of mathematical functions. And because it's math, it has real, provable limitations. Let me give you a concrete example. A basic part of human reasoning is something called function composition. It's simple stuff, like knowing that a grandparent is a parent of a parent. But here's the wild part. Research has mathematically proven that the transformer architecture, which is the foundation for almost all modern LLMs, is incapable of doing this reliably once the problem gets complicated enough. It's not a bug that can be fixed. It's a fundamental limit of its design. So let's put it all together. The 6 big realities we need to remember. Ready? Here we go. It's pattern matching, not thinking. It's code, not cognition. It generates, it doesn't retrieve. It reflects our biases, it isn't objective. It's a tool, not an actor. And finally, it's just math, with real, fundamental limits. At the end of the day, maybe the best way to think about AI is as a mirror, a powerful, complex mathematical mirror that just reflects the data, the values, and yeah, the flaws that we feed into it. So if we look into that mirror and we don't like what we see, if we're bothered by its biases and its limitations, then the real question we have to ask is, what does that say about us?